Fires ripped through a Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh on Friday. Cramped and dangerous conditions for the more than 1 million ethnic Rohingya who fled Myanmar since 2017. But now there's concern for those back home.
Hundreds of Muslim ethnic minority Rohingyas have been conscripted to fight for Myanmar's embattled military junta.
But these Rohingyas are stuck in these camps. They're never allowed to move anyway. They're completely trapped.
The UN is warning of the risk of increased violence in Myanmar's western Rakhine state. It's home to the minority Rohingya community.
Before we start today's interview, please allow me a word or two about our podcast. Even as Myanmar plunges into a civil war because of the military's bloody coup, the international community and media organizations have all but turned their backs on the country and its people. But this humble platform is committed to staying the course. We conduct nuanced, long-form interviews with a variety of guests connected to Myanmar so our listeners can better understand the ongoing crisis. Thank you for choosing to spend the next couple of hours with us today.
And welcome back. Today to discuss the history and the ongoing nature of the Rohingya crisis and the Rohingya experience, we have a renowned activist, Sujauddin, joining us. And I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. And I'd like to give you the opportunity first to introduce yourself and your background for our audience.
Thank you very much, Brett, for inviting me for your programs. I'm a Rohingya. I was born in Jokto, Arakan, which is now known as Rakhine. And I'll explain that later about why Rakhine and Arakan is a bit of a political term. And I lived and grew up in Rakhine, and I had to leave the country when I was about 17 years old. And since then, I've been involved in democracy activism in various countries as a refugee, and finally I also resettled in Australia, and I continued my activism in Australia. And currently my focus is more on Rohingyas' right and a safe and peaceful place for Rohingyas' future. And also I'm involved in running refugee community centers and school in Malaysia.
Excellent. So there's quite a lot been going on and clearly a very tumultuous life. But before we sort of delve into that, I think what would be useful for the audience and generally for anybody who's interested in this is looking at the history, looking at the context, because for a lot of people, I think the Rohingya became a topic in the 2017 genocide. And I think a lot of people outside of the region didn't know about the Rohingya as a people before then. So I want to look a little bit at the historical context and just right off the bat, in your introduction, you mentioned that the distinction between Rakhine and Arakan is a bit political. The state is called Rakhine, but the predominant ethnic group are called the Arakan, and I believe historically the region was called the Arakan Kingdom or the Arakan Principality. So I wonder if you can explain a little bit about the choice of word, the choice of language, and what implications it has.
Basically, for the short answer, Rakhine is just recent renaming had happened to avoid or to deny the existence of any other group in Arakan except the Rakhine, who were historically late arrivals, if you like. Uh, and, and they, I mean, it's only in Ne Win's government, I think it was in I forgot the exact year, in 80s, the Arakan was changed into to Rakhine. I mean, the first known, this area was known as the Nyav, in Burmese, the Nyavati, but the original name is the Nyavati. The Nyavati is 1st and 6th centuries. And then in the first to 6th century AD, I think, yes, if I'm not too confusing with the date, 1st to 6th century AD, it was called Vasali. Vasali in Burmese, they call it Waithali. It's a pronunciation, called it Waithali. And then 3rd to 11th century AD, until modern day, it was Arkan, and then just recently changed into Rakhine. So when we say Arkan, Arkan is not specific to one ethnic group. Now, Rakhines, who used to be known as Mog, I mean, a lot of historical documents, they were known as Mog. They that called themselves Rakhine, and obviously, everybody has the right to name themselves whatever they want to be, and we respectfully call them that, Rakhine. And then very recently they started to call themselves as Arkanis, or part of the Arkan nation. Just to give you another example, for example, for us, for the Rohingya people, the land, that area was also always known as Rohang, the land of Rohang. And the people of Rohang are Rohingya, regardless of their race and religion. And it was, I mean, we need to understand that Rohingyas never historically, just to call one group of people, whoever belonged to the land was always a Rohingya people. And it was also the same until the terms has become politically, or it has some political significance. For example, when the land was called Arkan, and a lot of people call themselves Arkanis, like an American, you might have a Native American, you might have Irish Americans, or you might have other Americans who would call themselves American, although they might have a unique ethnic identity to themselves. So that was the thing, and only in last century that terms has become very politically motivated, and also a reason to prosecute others.
So, I mean, while we're on this topic, I think this is just a useful thing to clarify the pronunciation, because I learned my pronunciation from the Burmese influence, and so I say Rohingya. A lot of people in the English-speaking world say Rohingya. You seem to be saying it Rohingya as like a softened sound. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yeah, well, yes, I think even within the Rohingya community, depending on the region and influence of the language, you might even slightly say it differently.
Okay.
It's just an accent thing, but the word is people of Rohang, basically. People of Rohang are Rohingya.
Interesting. And so that means that the Rohingya label is a geographic label. It's something that's connected to the actual space. It was not originally. Are you saying it was not originally a sort of ethnic identifier, that there can be different ethnic groups that are Rohingya because of the region where they live?
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely. That was the original belief. Let me give you an example, right? We after the independent, there were a group of, I mean, there's a group of Rakhine who were part of now in Bangladesh, right? And also there's some Rakhines are in a Burmese side of the border, and some of the Pakistan back then, the Pakistan side of the border. Now, when we talk about this two group of people in our Rohingya language, we call them Rohingya Mok and Anokia Mok, for example. Anok, in Burmese, Anok means north. So we say the Mok, which is Rakhine in reference, are from western part of our country now, and those are who are in the land, in the Rohang land, we call them Rohingya Mok. So therefore, we identify people of the land as a Rohingya.
Interesting. That's very important to understand. And so this has clearly shifted in the general discourse, and even before the 2017 genocide, clearly the perception has been on the part of, at the very least, the military, the government, that the Rohingya are not a geographic description; it is an ethnic description. And specifically, it seems the narrative is that the Rohingya people are Bangladeshi people. That has been the narrative that has been pushed by the military government. That's what it is to be Rohingya. It is to be a Bangladeshi Muslim who has crossed the border into Myanmar. When did this idea start to become popular?
Well, I think this idea started to become popular only after military coup in 1962.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously there's a lot of the Rakhine, the politicians have also had a big role to play in it. For example, if you look at right after the pre-independent statements about Rohingya, just a few popular ones. I don't want to go into a lot of the historical details. For example, Sachui, the first president, Sachui Tai, his statement is, if the Rohingyas are not ethnic of Myanmar or Burma back then we cannot claim ourselves as an ethnic of Burma. So before that, it was not an issue. I mean, we have radio stations dedicated to the Rohingya language, and we were part of the broader the ethnic groups. And there are so many references, I can go on and on, right? And after a military coup, let me clear this as well. A lot of prosecutions happened to Rohingya are not only perpetrated by the Burmese, but it is in many cases were either invited or initiated by the Rakhine leaders, and they, in one sense, I believe the Burmese were actually used to eliminate the Rohingyas from the land, from their original land, by the Rakhine in centuries. If we like, it was one of the things that a lot of the historians, Rohingya historians and others believe. The invasion of Rakhine in 1778, I think it was, or 1782. In that period, What's actually the Rakhine says, Rakhine has invited the Burmese to invade, to weaken the Rohingya population, to drive the Rohingya population off. And the Burmese has notoriously known for their, Genghis Khan-like atrocities, and they have killed many, many, many people. So, to answer the questions, I think the propaganda widely started. Before that, there was not a problem. Is in late 1960s and 70s, this a problem started. Yeah.
Only in the 1960s. Interesting. And so that raises a point, because the tension here seems to be between the Rohingya people, or the people that we today identify as Rohingya, and the people that we today identify as Arakan or Rakhine. So you seem to be saying that those people, the Arakan/Rakhine people who speak a dialect or a language closely related to Burmese and are predominantly Buddhist, that they came to the region later, and that they have had a concerted effort to bring in Burmese influences to push the Rohingya off their land. Is that an accurate description of the history?
I think that, yeah, absolutely, that's the accurate description of the history.
And so, is there any sort of origin to the bad relationship between the Rohingya and the Arakan, or is that simply a question of land and power?
Yeah, we need to be realistic in this. It is pretty much the question of land and power.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that has obviously fueled. Let me just give you one more clarification, just so that we understand. We often associate, when we say Rohingya, in association with Muslims, right? Rohingya Muslims.
Yes.
Right? Which is true. The vast majority of Rohingyas are Muslims. And it's also a understanding that whenever we say Rohingya, there's very quickly people believe that Rohingyas are maybe not as a recent migrant as the Burmese or Rakhine's claim, but we often, news articles would say, or they have been living there for centuries. So in other words, the Rohingya Muslims migrated to that land, right? What I wanted to clarify is, it's not the people who migrated to the land. It's the religion who influenced to the people of the land.
Okay.
For example, nobody would say, what would be the best example? In Malaysia, let's say, for example, right? The Malaysians are the Malay people, are the land of Malaya. That would be, the religious propagators came and propagated their religion, and people accepted the religion and they become Muslims.
Interesting.
So
the religion came. The people stayed. They just changed their religion.
Yes. So these are the same people who were the people of the Nyawadi, the people of Vaidali, the people of Arakan, the people of Rohang, for that matter, when they called the land as a Rohang. These are the people. They were pagans, they were Hindus in the periods, and they became Muslims in a period of time.
Interesting. So then, taking it a little bit more modern. So after the coup, there's this tension over land and control of the state with the Arakan, and you have this military government after the coup that is trying to portray the Rohingya as sort of illegitimate. And we'll definitely talk about the 2017, but prior to that, what was the Rohingya experience like in Rakhine State? How regular, how severe was the persecution, or were there periods of relative peace and friendly relations with the other groups?
The Rakhine and Rohingya relationship is very dynamic in a way, because whenever the Rakhines are in conflict with Burmese, they tend to have a bit of a lesser tension with Rohingyas at the beginning, and then whenever they will have a better relationship with Burmese, then the Rohingyas will be suffering, at the hands of the Rakhines. This is just a general political statement, if you like. The life. I think probably best to share my childhood experience so that you understand. People can relate to that, perhaps, in a personal experience. When I was growing up in 80s, there was the Rohingyas has relatively equal right to Rakhine, because we had the same national ID card, we had access to the same services, we had people we still had people in the government services, police force, in military. My own maternal uncle was in military. So, and even though the propaganda started since late 60s and 70s, but there were still people enjoying relative right, if you like, citizenship right. We still have access to hospitals, we still have access to schools, and there were the ethnic tension, in areas where there were majority Rakhine would bully the Rohingyas, and and vice versa. For example, whenever there was more Rohingyas, perhaps probably they would also have the same kind of situations. The Rakhine would have lesser, power or authority in certain areas. But where I grew up, we were only about 25% after the big massacre happens in World War II. So the remaining 25% of the population of Choctaw was pretty much living under the mercy of Rakhine goodwill. We had, like my family had, for example, shops in the main bazaar, main market of Choctaw. We had lands, but we were always prevented or harassed while we were going to the shops or to the market. We were harassed. We were always prevented in one way, prevented not by the government but by the local Rakhine accessing schools. Imagine, for 11-year-old, sometimes they have to carry weapons to protect themselves, like knives, on the way to schools and on the way back from schools. And slowly, what started to happen was, in 90s, the Burmese government started to impose that 1982 citizenship law, and then our identity cards were either forcefully confiscated. I don't know, the terms, Mapongde, Nanganda Sisi, Kapia, all these registration cards, right? Different national ID cards. So, I mean, I even had a passport as a child. So I was a full citizen,
Yeah.
But when in 1990s, our, those passports were confiscated, and my mom and dad still had their national ID card, but we were still too young to have national ID card. However, a lot of Rohingyas' national ID cards were, you know, either by what do they call it, by hook or crook.
Yeah.
You know, they will say, you know, if you surrender this ID card, then we will issue a new card, and then we never issue the new card.
Wow.
So when these things start happening, and slowly our access to services becoming more and more complicated as a non-citizens, you can't travel anymore because there's always roadblocks and there was a police checkings. You can't even buy the tickets for plane or ships. And access to education is becoming complicated. Access to government services becoming complicated. And because you cannot travel anymore, your business become a problem. You know, it's impacting your business because you can't go and trade, or you can't go and buy things from the city to sell in your towns. And all of these things becoming slowly, what is the word? I'm trying to find the right word. Becoming more and more difficult or tightened around Rohingyas. And now, who are implementing this? Although it is, supported by the Burmese government, but the Rakhine local bureaucrats and law enforcement officers are the one who are imposing all these laws, and even civilians in many cases.
Okay. So you seem to be saying that a lot of the latent problems were not centralized at all. It was mostly sort of racist attitudes from the Rakhine themselves that were the problem for the Rohingya. It was not a nationwide phenomenon at this point.
No, not at all. Because, for example, the Rohingyas who were in other part of Myanmar, they enjoyed pretty much the same right.
Oh.
You know, in Yangon, for example, we have a lot of Rohingyas in Yangon, but until, quite late, they even had to change their ethnic name to their hiding. I don't know. Some would call themselves Burmese Muslims or what not. There were so many hyphen names, or the command, or so. The original card that they had, the green three-folded card, they call it Tongkokcho, basically three-folded card, had their ethnicity name as a Rohingya, but then later on they changed in many things, including some officers would forcefully put the name as a Bengali, for example.
I see.
Or Indian Muslims, or Patti Muslims. I don't know. There are so many hyphen names had become. However, the level of discriminations and atrocities are not the same in Arakan and other part of Myanmar.
Right. Okay. So it wasn't. So it's the discrimination. It was every day. It seems it's bureaucratic discrimination. It's police discrimination. It's racism from civilians. It's not these major military operations that you had to be afraid of. It was more subtle, but more surrounding you every day. It sounds like.
So until mid 90s, it was pretty much come from civilians. And from mid 90s, not even mid 90s, from pretty much Tan Shui government. Ken Yew was the prime minister, also who was the military intelligence head of the military intelligence, MI10, this was called, right? And they, in that era, the Rohingya situations become like living hell in Arakan, from forced labors to, travel restrictions, and the military also were, they were brutal against Rohingyas, And I might point out this is not only against Rohingyas, they were also brutal against Rakhine too. I must admit that. However, the Rakhines were less impacted with their brutality. I mean, what were the Rakhines will be impacted, for example, forced labor. They were also impacted by forced labor. However, because a lot of the, have you, you probably know about the forced labor in 1990s, and the forced labor system was pretty much gradually changed, how they were like taking people for forced labor. At the beginning, a group of military personnel will come into the village, and then they will arrest young men, then take them to forced labor to work for days, and then will release. After a while, the military personnel don't come anymore. They just send a letter to the Rawata, the head of the village, basically. The head of the village then will go door to door to say, this is your turn, this is your turn, this is your turn. And they will just say, simply state a number, it's this many people we want, 100 people or 50 people. So what happened was, a lot of the head of the village were Rakhine. So the Rakhine will automatically target only the Rohingya. Or sometime they will have, let's say, if they have demanded 100 villages for forced labor, but 90 would be Rohingyas and 10 would be Rakhine. So in that sense, they were indirectly, again, even though there are some military atrocities were equally impacted. However, Rakhine the Rohingyas were more affected than Rakhine. And when we look at travel restrictions, for example, the Rakhine didn't have travel restrictions; they could travel, but the Rohingyas had travel restrictions. It was not simply because of the military army imposed this. This was imposed by the bureaucracy, by the police. The police are, the head of the bureaucracy. They would issue this tokanza, the what is the word for English? It's like a recommendation letter to verify that this person is from this town, right? From the police station would issue this letter. What they used to do, they charged so much for that letter. It has become almost impossible for a common Rohingya to even obtain that letter. For example, just to give you a context, in 1994, one teacher's monthly salary was 900 jet, right? And to obtain this letter, you have to pay police 300 jet. So it's like 35% of a professional's salary a month, monthly salary. And so let's say from Choctaw to Sittwe to travel, the ticket was 25 to 45 jet, depending on what shift you are traveling. For a Rohingya, that ticket become almost 250 jet.
Wow.
How many percent is that? I don't know, 1,000% more. Yeah. And this is not military. This is the Rakhine officers and the public service officers, let's say, they were the one who will do this. And even if you have a ticket, for example, you might not get a proper place. You might not even got onto the ship, depending on the officer over there. this sort of discriminations that which never, I don't know, a lot of people had never have access to. And hospitals, schools, like, I mean, one incident, when I was in school in year 6, we had arguments, and I was beaten by Rakhine kids, and I will put the complaint to the teachers, and the teachers will come and often will say, come on guys, why you're fighting all this, right? Like, I mean, it might seem like any school, anywhere, every school, there are some people bully the others, right? But in this case, the bullies were encouraged. How did they encouraged? First, we were both called to the office, to the principal's office, and we were both hit with the cane for fighting. Instead of punishing the bully, we were both hit, right? And second time, and one of the teacher was actually telling the person who hit me, the gang who hit me basically, who beat me up, telling them, make sure next time you beat him so much so that he do not dare to complain. So this is happening in the school. And because of that, a lot of Rohingyas never go to school. And that was the purpose, so that they remain illiterate. Just to give you another context, when I was in high school, someone, a Rohingya, who somehow reaching to high schools is a battle. It's a battle that it's a life battle they probably had to go through to reach. You need to have so much willpower to learn or to be educated, to able to reach to high school. So when I was in year 9 high school in 1996, we were only 9 Rohingya students. In the year 9, we had about 250 students. If you look at the population, we are 25% of the population. But 9 out of 250, how many percent is that makes, I guess?
It's about 4%.
4%. So this is how the Rohingyas were not only discouraged, but violently prevented from attending school. Institutionalized, discriminations in many, many ways as well. And another example, when I was year 5, some of my friends, these are friends that we grew up together, like we were neighbors, basically, Rakhine friends. They all joined martial arts, karate classes. And I also joined the karate class. And I was refused, said, oh, you're not allowed to join the karate class. I asked why, because you're Rohingya. Not Rohingya, sorry, because you're Kala. By the way, they don't call us Rohingya, they call us Kala. Kala is for your audience, I don't know, you could give a better reference. It's like, what is the best? The best I could say is, calling nigger, for example.
Yeah.
It's a very degrading term, Kala.
Yeah.
So Kalas are not allowed to join these classes, martial art classes. And later on, my friend told me, because when I asked my friend, so it's all right, I can't join, but you are joining the classes. When you practice, can I join with you to practice, right? And he said to me, we were told that if you teach any Kala this art, the punishment would be the council of the martial art would break one of your leg or your arm.
I think that's insane.
Yeah. So this is the. Having said this, right? I mean, you can. I mean, this is very general experience, of course, and I'm not saying every Rakhine is like this. For example, the friends that I just give reference here, we have a very good relationship with this family. You know, my dad went to school together with their dads and these kids. So we went to school together. We have good relationship. We have trades. We have we have friendship. However, this person probably is very good friend of mine, but he might treat other Rohingyas not the same, So that's also is true.
So it must be a very strange experience to be friends with a person who might simultaneously have racist views and attitudes towards your ethnic group, your community.
It's how do I say? It's a kind of it's very difficult to explain how the dynamic of the relationship. And that's actually, when I first time heard the Malcolm X's speech, home slave, house slave, and field slave. Then it was quickly related to me very quickly. It's like, wow, it's like Malcolm X is speaking to me directly. Because we actually, because we were so oppressed, we were so, the word is oppressed, I guess. We find any friendship, anyone who would say a nice word, we will give the life for them, Any Rakhine who might say, you know what, you are a better Kala than the other Kala, and we will say, you are my best friend. Because we couldn't even comprehend. He is technically saying you're a better dog than the other dog. We couldn't comprehend that. We were like, wow, this guy, I have this guy at least. This I know, this is my friend. Regardless that friend take me as, regardless of that friend actually take me as a friend or not,
That's an incredible level of indoctrination to have and to carry around with you, and then later to have to realize like oh my god, like this is below the minimum standard, and we used to praise it, and we used to be so happy to have something so basic.
I mean, let me put, like, this is in Rakhine, right? And let me give you a little example. In Australia, now this is no longer Rakhine. This is Rakhine in Rakhine. This is some of the Rakhine in Australia and the so-called democracy activist 1988 generation. We call it 88 generations activist. Now, after I left Burma in 1998, I left Choctaw in 1996 when I was 16. And anyway, and I thought, if we had democracy, then our life would be different. So I dedicated my entire youth to learn about democracy, to learn about, organizing campaigns and all that, and, wearing Aung San Suu Kyi's shirts everywhere, never missing her, birthdays and praying for her everywhere in our prayers and joining any movement that possibly we can, or where sometimes we were accepted from Thailand, from Malaysia, and when I end up in Australia as well. So in Australia, I was able to do it more openly. So, especially after the, Saffron Revolution, 2007. During 2007, I was more involved in terms of advocating for human rights for all Burmese, and the release of Aung San Suu Kyi and for the democracy and all that. There were a lot of people who would accepted me as their comrade, as their co-campaigner or fighter. There are others who would ridicule me as well, but I never take it. But this time, my level of understanding racism is much better than when the level I was in Rakhine. Let's say, I've started to feel that how they are trying to take advantage of me as you are lower than us, or the treatment they had and all this. But I have as equal power now. I have same right as they have in Australia. So, but because my intention was to focus on the eliminate, the dictatorship. Let's say we want to have democracy. I ignored these facts. But when 2012 massacre happened, people don't know about 2012 massacre because people were too focused on the transition. The international community ignored the 2012 massacre against Rohingya people in Rakhine state.
Yeah.
I tried to. It was almost worse than the 2017 massacre.
Really?
Too many towns, they wiped out the entire Muslim population, like Tokyo, like they were all in the camps. For example, in town, major town of Sittwe and Pokto, and even in Myanmar, Miao, and so many towns, villages were wiped out, and it's quite strangely those villages are resettled by the Rakhine people now. Settled by Rakhine people. So at that time, when I was trying to reach out to those comrades who we fought together for many, many, many years, or campaigned together for many, many years for democracy, they blocked me in the social media. They blocked my number. They will not talk to me.
Wow. But so let's talk about the 2012 massacre then, because you're completely correct. That's not something that most people in the international community talk about or even know about. So contextually, this is the 2010 election, such as it was held. The NLD boycotted the election, and the notionally civilian government comes into power, I think, in 2011. Under Thein Sein, who is a military general, and then he quits his job as a military general so that he can become a civilian, quote unquote, civilian president. So it's early stages of this pseudo democracy, and Myanmar begins opening up. Things start improving, markets start improving, opportunities to travel start happening, and then 2012, we have this incident. So the one very important question was: this now being instigated by the central authority in Myanmar, or was this being led predominantly by the Rakhine people?
No, it was led by Rakhine people.
Okay.
It was predominantly led by Rakhine people. It was, in effect, wherever military presence. Now, the military actually used this in their advantage as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in some places, military actually gives some protection to Rohingya. For example, in Chokto, because we could bribe the general in that barracks to come and protect us. So from Australia, I sent money to Yangon to communicate and like overnight to send military to protect our village. However, in other places, the police, not necessarily the military, but police and the paramilitary, those who are Rakhine, are actually participated with the Rakhine mobs in burnings and killings of Rohingya people. In Chofu, that's the case. In Sittwe, that was the case. And end up hundreds of thousands people, almost 150,000 IDPs in Sittwe now, and many other IDPs as well in around other part of the Rakhine state.
So I think it's pretty significant, though, that the military, even though the military was not the ones responsible for this, the military would not defend you.
No.
Ostensibly, Myanmar people would not defend you on principle. They would only defend you if you bribe them to do so.
Oh yes, yeah. So the sentiment of the years and years of propaganda, the Rakhine, not only Rakhine, the entire Myanmar has this feeling that, or that this belief that the Rohingyas are actually dangerous for our country. They are, because that's what we're telling them, right? This propaganda, they came from Bangladesh, they are invaders, they just, like this is the signature propaganda slogans, and everywhere I hear this is the same slogan as in India, this is the same slogan that the Nazi had propagated against Jews in World War before, after World War One. In other places too, I can give many examples like that. They procreate unusually more, and it was very easy because you're Muslims, and that was the period. The Muslims were infamous everywhere in the world after particularly the World Trade Center attacks.
Yeah.
And the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center and the mainstream media. So the name Muslim itself became a problematic name just to be a Muslim, right? And on top of that, there is the Sangha, the monks, and the military, and the bureaucracy, and the literature, and news, everything, and you have nothing to counter all these arguments, right? You can't even claim yourself as Rohingya. You can't even say the name. You will be arrested. And to the point that if you say the name Rohingya and you're arrested, you could face 17 to 40 years of jail. So there was these anti-Rohingya sentiments was widespread already by 2012. So calling names like rats, snakes, all these genocidal terms, it is it is okay to kill a Rohingya because they are rats, they are cockroaches, they are ugly as orcs. This is what the Burmese ambassador in Taiwan, I think, or Hong Kong, I forgot he said it, right?
Yeah.
So entire Burmese population think the Rohingyas are the and the other thing they said recent migrant. Often they will accompany by saying in our lifetime,
Yeah.
and these are people who are in their late 30s or 40s. It's mean
Yeah.
in one generation, So the entire Burmese population actually applauded 2012 and 2006 and 2016 and 2017 massacre.
Yes. I remember that. I was there when that happened. But it's I'm just wondering why the Rohingya, because the Muslim element, that's very clear, and we see groups like, Mabata, and before Mabata we had the whatever they were called, the 969 movement, or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly. And their anti-Muslim rhetoric is and always has been very strong, and that's clear. But there are other Muslim groups in Myanmar, like in Yangon alone. I used to walk to work at Aung San Stadium. There is a very large masjid, and there are Rohingya, but many of the people there are not Rohingya. Many of those people were migrants or descendants of migrants from northeastern India. Many people coming from places like Gujarat. So there are
Yeah.
Muslim communities. There are Muslim communities in Shan State. The Rohingya seem to be particularly targeted. The erasure of the Rohingya name, of this very identity, seems to be unique. I haven't heard of this happening with other groups within Myanmar. So it's I'm just wondering, how did the Rohingya become such a specific target for the
Well,
country?
for a number of reasons. First of all, this is obviously it is the creation, the fear of Rohingya against Burmese people, a creation of Rakhine. For example, 1982 law was actually proposed and written by Rakhine, co-written by Rakhine.
Mm,
So there was so many propagandas were, you know, told or spread by Rakhine. And secondly, this is the Rohingya is the only group that is ethnically belong to the land, which they deny, because Burma and Rakhine has the same policy, which is AA now has the same policy. It's a one country, one nation, one religion policy.
hmm
The Burma also, well, we can have a few people here and there who would not claim equal rights, let's say, because none of those Muslims group are you claim an ethnicity right. They are very happy saying we are as citizens. And for your viewers, you probably understand this. For your viewers, in Burma, just citizens mean you are second-class citizens unless you are affiliated or associated with another ethnic group. If you
Yeah.
are Karen, if you are Kachin, you may be persecuted too because you claim greater rights from the military and Burmese in the Burmese dominant or the supremacy. But even for the Rohingyas, because we claim that we are part of this, we are indigenous to this land, and that also mean that Rakhines and the Burmese, they both know Rakhine is a culturally, linguistically different from Burma, from Burmese people. People
Yeah.
of Rohingyas are, right, and they are, the Rakhine was. I mean, let's put it this way: Arakan was invaded by Burmese in 1780. I think it was 1788. Anyway, and then 1828, the British invaded Rakhine. So technically, the Burmese has the Rakhine under their colony only for about 40 years. Therefore, in that 40 years, there was a lot of demography change had happened to put more people, by the Burmese invaders. So if they don't crush Rohingya as a name, their political in later on they will start to claim that political right of the indigenous right. So that's what they didn't want, and obviously that's the Muslim element as well.
So let's then move forward. So 2012, we have this enormous massacre, but predominantly perpetrated by the Rakhine people themselves, with the Burmese military letting it happen, but not actively engaged in it. 5 years later, we're in 2017. This is not a long period of time.
Yes.
But this time, it seems that the Burmese military was very, very much engaged and was
Yes.
very much directly responsible for a lot of the killings, directly responsible for a lot of the rapes, directly responsible for a lot of the arson, and of course directly responsible for 750,000 people having to escape across the border to Bangladesh. What happened in those 5 years to galvanize the military? And my understanding is the Arakan people are not friends with the Burmese military to begin with. It just seems that in this case, they were willing to work together
Yeah.
for perhaps the first time. Like what happens in 5 years to make such a radical change?
If you would remember, after 2012, there was a lot of international attention started to get about Rohingya, because before that, nobody even heard of Rohingya. All these persecutions that I was describing during my childhood was almost unknown to many people. Many people mean I'm talking about people who are even journalists and human rights activists and all that, who are actually working for Burmese democracy, wasn't aware of it. Even the Burmese themselves, a lot of the Burmese themselves wasn't aware of this level of persecutions happening in Arakan. Now, after 2012, there's a bit of international outcry, let's say, particularly from Muslim countries. You know, and there was some, even Obama came and we campaigned so hard to Obama to say the name Rohingya, at least in his speech in Yangon when he came to meet Aung San Suu Kyi, all that. And there was a brewing resentment. And if you remember, when after 2012 incidents in its massacre against Rohingya in Rakhine, there was also a massacre in Metila, that is in the heart of Burma, in Yangon as well, against Muslims, and burning the schools and all that. So there is this anti-Muslim was brewing, right?
Yeah.
Anti-Muslims were brewing, and on the other hand, after 2012, the Rohingyas has completely given up their hope, like myself, that democracy might change our faith, and we realize that is not the case. Even Aung San Suu Kyi, who we looked at as a beacon of hope for Burmese people, for humanity even, had completely denied the existence of the Rohingya people. Then there was a group of people who says, you know what, we're gonna have to look at take these things in our own hands, and people started to taking up arms, and they this is the only time in last 40 years, I think, any Rohingya group that has attacked military directly.
Wow.
And the military had a lot of public support and already, and the Rakhines are on their side in this campaign. So they say, let's finish it, let's, do this. And like Mayon Lang said, it's unfinished business. So the Burmese and Rakhine has this idea that we will eliminate the entire Rohingya thing from our land. And if you think about it, they were successful over the years. I mean, 2017, 1 million people crossed the border and 10,000 people something had died. But today, over 80% of Rohingya population is outside of the country. So in other words, they have already successfully driven out or killed many Rohingyas. We don't know the exact population, but almost 4 million people are outside of the country now. Inside there are about 600,000, I think, left. In Bangladesh alone, in the camp, 1.2 to 1.3 million. We don't know the exact number. Some says 1.2, some say 1.3, so 1.5. This is only in the camp. There are many Rohingyas who lived in other part of Bangladesh as well. We have close to 200,000 refugees in Malaysia. We have almost 30 to 40,000 in Thailand. We have a similar number in India. We have 4 generations refugees still in Pakistan. Just recently, a researcher from US, he told me he estimate in Pakistan there will probably be 1.5 million Rohingyas in Pakistan. And other parts of Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia and many other countries, the estimation is again about from 400,000 only in Saudi Arabia, and we don't know the exact data or exact numbers in UAE, in Qatar, in Kuwait, in other part of countries, including Turkey, Gulf. So this is not just 2007. 2017 is the last attempt, if you like. There were so many operations that had happened. So yeah, 2017 is the continuation of those operations.
And so let's look at this sort of the notional respite between 2017 operation, but before the 2021 coup. What is the reality like? I mean, most Rohingya, as you describe, are no longer in the country. They're internationally trying to find refugee status. They're trying to get some sort of citizenship. I assume most are without any sort of citizenship. They're stateless. Many, as you say, living in the refugee camps, particularly around Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. The number that I've heard is 1.5 million. So a lot of different experiences. But what would you say really characterizes those 4 years? Was there any change in sentiment in Myanmar? Did the Rohingya in Myanmar think, okay, maybe things are going to get better again? And did the Rohingya internationally find that they were being supported, find that their cause was being defended by foreign countries, by NGOs, by AIDS groups, or was it just a different type of persecution?
You mean 2017 to
2021. Yeah.
21. I think the arrogance and the hatred has boosted after 2017. I think, to the Burmese government, particularly when their mother, Sue, which for Rohingya, she's, I describe her as a monster Sue, rather. Might offend some of my friends, the listeners, but when she completely denied the genocide and even the atrocities, it's actually given license to her followers who already were brainwashed by the military against Rohingyas or prejudice against Rohingyas, to the point when I went back to Yangon briefly in 2017, just for a week. A lot of people don't think I'm Rohingya because I have a pretty different physical features that look a bit more different, let's say. And if I say I'm Australian, they just automatically believe me that I'm Australian.
Yeah.
And I would join a lot of conversations. This has happened in 2012, 15. I visited Yangon, and also 2017. Right after the mass exodus.
Yeah.
The sentiments, those, like CBOs and like Irrawaddy News and other news outlets, it was very scary the way I started when there's. It's almost like killing Rohingya was the patriotic act. They were doing the right thing, good thing for the country. Or dehumanizing. And if you look at any articles from 2012 to 2021 of Irrawaddy, all of them are pretty anti Rohingya. And even academics, monks, and I was in the conversation that this is the same rhetoric happened in 2012. It is scary to say how similar it is. I was in a conversation in 2017 to be exact, in the Rangoon Sailors Sailing Club with a group of Australian return, a group of university students and some academics and activists and politicians. And we were talking about, about human rights and how to improve human rights situations in Burma and all that. And then I would just throw a word to say, what do you guys think about, what about the human rights of the Rohingya? And someone's like, but they are all terrorists.
Jesus.
And I would say, surely the whole population, you think? Oh, but you don't know, these Muslims are dangerous. Everywhere they go, they bring problem. You see entire world, because of the Muslims, there are problems. And then I said, do you think the Tan Shui was Muslims and Ne Win was Muslim to bring the massacres in Uta, revolutions and the 1988 revolution, and there were mass massacres and mass killings of Karens and Kachins, and do you think the military was Muslim too? But this is a different case.
Of course.
This is between 2017 and 2021. However, the international attention was shifted.
Yes.
Case started to register with ICJ and started to, registered with other courts and ICC, and including the America announcing this as a genocide. So it has shifted with no changes in the ground. It's just rhetorical in somewhat, and somewhere opinion shift, or somewhere maybe policy shift, if you like, but not real not toward the real solution.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a very typical sort of response.
yeah.
But I take your point. It's I was not reading the articles, right, when I was there.
Mm,
I because the news that I read is mostly English language news,
mm,
so that's a little bit different. Obviously, I'm getting news from Amnesty International articles. I'm getting news from Reuters. I'm getting all this sort of stuff. And most of the people that I talk to, whether they're foreigners or whether they're Burmese, naturally most of those people speak fluent English, and because of that, they have access to the same media that I read. But when I spoke to those of my friends who had weaker English, who were mostly reading Myanmar news, their attitudes towards the Rohingya were extreme. And I remember seeing one guy, and he actually spoke fluent English, like he was like Western educated, but he was saying, "Oh, this is necessary," and he even shared a video showing Arsa, training with like I don't know what you would describe them as, maybe as mujahideen or something in Pakistan. And I was watching this video going like, you you realize that these people are running around with literal sticks in their hands, wooden cutouts of guns, that they don't even have guns. And he's saying like, no, but it's a terrorist training camp. And it's okay, so how big is Arsa? It's like, 500 people, maybe 750 people, most of whom live in Bangladesh. So how many Arsa are there in Myanmar? Maybe 150. Okay, so to get 150 people, you push 750,000 people over the border. The mathematics don't make sense here. This doesn't make sense. But he would just dig in his heels. He would just push back on it. It's like, no, it's they're training terrorists, and they're trying to do all these things. And it was really terrifying to watch how strong these views and these attitudes became. And then the other thing that I observed, I don't know whether you saw these signs. The signs were in Yangon, I would say probably in 2019, when Aung San Suu Kyi was going to the ICJ.
Yes.
And the signs were like, the English version of the road sign said, "We support our leader, Aung San Suu Kyi." The
Yes.
Burmese version of the sign, though, was what was it like? Ape Jazo, right? So
Yeah.
it wasn't even "we support." It's "let's support," or like
Let's support.
commanding
Yes.
people to support.
Yes.
And all the, like, I had a lot of Burmese students who were so proud, like, Aung San Suu Kyi is going to defend our country in the ICJ against these accusations. I'm like, these are not accusations. Like, these are facts. Like, we saw the pictures. Like, we saw what happened. This is not a good look. But it I was discussing with my friends that the feeling was very much that the average person, even if they thought that what happened in Rakhine was wrong, the average person seemed to be so terrified of criticizing the NLD government because of this feeling that if I criticize the NLD government, that must mean that I'm supporting the military dictatorship. And I
Yes.
don't do that, so I must support the NLD government. And it was really difficult, like, trying to have conversations about this. I remember in Yangon at that time was very frustrating for a lot of us, foreigner and Myanmar. Like, it was very frustrating trying to have an intelligent discussion about this. I just watching the effect that the propaganda had on people was just, it was a perverse experience. I imagine for you it would be much, 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 much worse. But even for me, not reading the news, it was terrible.
Yeah. I mean, imagine, you Rohingya, and you have gone through all this suffering yourself, and then you're trying to have the conversation, trying to be neutral as
Mm,
possible, and not identify yourself as a Rohingya, and it's on your face, right? They will say things, and it was very difficult. But I always believed, I always believed there is intrinsic goodness in humanity, and also evil, of course. And I always believed that one of a very respectful person, the one who I respect so much, a human rights lawyer as well. She even said that when I expressed sometime hopelessness about the Burmese and the Rakhine people, he would say, uh, if still its coexistence is still possible, and you need social engineering. That's the first time I heard that word actually from her. You need social engineering, and that will, things change, and you can coexist again. But I don't believe that anymore. I mean, it's very hard for me to believe now, because it's not. I mean, there's. When sometimes people ask these questions like, why do they think like that? And even yesterday, someone asked me, say, like, how could they do that? Why would they do that? Right? Like, and I would say, when there is evil has no reason, no why. Some politicians might have power, reason, but sometimes we don't understand their justification for such evil. And when a group of people go to that extent, even Aung San Suu Kyi herself, what she did because she knew the popular support is against her, popular voters are against Rohingya. She couldn't say, even if she wished to say, if I want to believe that she has any good in her, and she knew that she would lose all her vote, and she knew the entire population is against this, and she played that along, right?
Yeah.
And very unfortunately, the international community thought, let's give a chance to this, as you rightly mentioned, pseudo democracy to thrive. Then we will have better human rights situation for this. So, in other words, international community has failed us massively by, what would you say? It's like a sacrificial animal for the ceremony of democracy to thrive in Myanmar.
I think that's a really interesting way to put it. It's sacrificed on that altar. It's performative,
Yes.
and I know that's something that you want to discuss now in the post-coup period, because we finally see, the Myanmar people have been pushed as far as they can be pushed, and the most stupid thing that the military ever did was give people genuine hope for democracy before taking it away. That was dumb. And now we see a nationwide civil war, and in that civil war, we see a lot of social change. We see, and we recently interviewed a feminist activist, talking about social change with regards to views on women and LGBT. But also we see shifts. We see the National Unity Government making these overtures towards the Rohingya community, talking about repatriation, talking about recognizing the Rohingya as a legitimate Myanmar ethnic group. We see all of these things, and that's definitely helping the international image of the revolution. It's definitely a good thing to see. But I know that you are of the view that a lot of what is being perceived is not being translated into real action. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going on?
Who is NUG? NUG is the same cabinet that was with Aung San Suu Kyi, 1915 to 20. And they were every rhetoric against, when related to Rohingya, they were against them. And they would say, we don't have any Rohingya, we don't recognize it, we don't, these are the people who was also introducing this, or promoting NVC card, National Verification Card. Can you imagine giving the National Verification Card to indigenous community people? Now, this group, when their situation changed, I know for the facts in many offices what they go to, the first question was asked to them was, what is your view on Rohingya? Offices, I mean, international advocacy, when they're trying to get recognitions with Australians or with any other governments, or even for fundings in many places, the first thing the international community asks is, what is your view about Rohingya? And the first thing a few ministers did, by the way, let me not acknowledge some sincerity in there, was not from NUG, but from the public, those civil, what do you call it, civil disobedient movement. Some of the public genuinely, apologized from Rohingya people for what we didn't, for, when you were suffering, we didn't do anything. And some of those voices are genuine, I think. And I would love to believe that. As I said, I believe goodness in humanity. Right? There are some of those. But later on, it's become a political statement. A lot of members of NUG, including back then, I forgot its name, the information minister, completely lying, his regret for not standing up when the Rohingyas were being persecuted. This is what exactly AA also used, the same tactic, to gain sympathy from the international community and to look good against their enemy, that is the Burmese, the military, right? This is the military who did it, not us.
So the minister, the minister of MOCIT in NUG is Tin Lin Aung. Is he the one you're referencing?
Yes, Tin Lin Aung, yes.
So you're saying that he is being disingenuous in his remorse, really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Even when you hear his, I think it was his, I forgot about something, 4 minutes or something that's video. If you like, the first thing is he's a minister of information, and he said, "Well, we didn't have any information about it. That's why."
Wow.
Okay. And there are, and also the terms they were using. For example, for a long time, they would say, "You know what? We will recognize Rohingyas as refugees." Sorry, not refugees. Sorry, as a citizen. And then very recently, they say they did not even say that we will abolish 1982 citizenship law. After a long push, they just said we abolish 1982 law. And then now, I don't think they still say we will recognize, like officially said, we recognize as ethnic groups or not. By the way, what I'm trying to say here is why, because I have personally dealt and experienced almost 2 decades of democracy campaign in Myanmar, for Myanmar, in many part of the country, many part of the world. What I realize is what they're saying now is not what they're going to implement. Because let's say, for example, we will recognize Rohingyas as ethnic groups. Now, when they will have to do this in parliament, right?
Yeah.
And in case when there's a proper democracy and comes, and there is some MPs saying no, we don't recognize it, and these back and forth arguments will go for another decades, and that will turn into centuries, and the Rohingya will perish by the time. Because it's not like Rohingyas are citizens of us. Not entire countries agrees with that. Until today, within NUG, and forget about within NUG, even the campaigners of NUG disagree with this. So no, we can't give them blank check. That's what they call it. Recognizing this indigenous group as like equal citizens, let's say.
Yeah.
I even argued, said, you know what? I would support even the idea that there wouldn't be no ethnicity status. Everybody will be equal. You can call whatever ethnicity you want. You can have your traditions, your language, but legally everybody will be the same. Just because you are ethnic, you will have different class of citizenship. If that is abolished, I don't think we would even argue about any ethnicity and this like this, because everybody's the same. Don't even put your ethnicity name on the ID identification card. It's everybody's equal, right? So even that is not something they are ready to accept easily, if you like. Rhetorically, some level they will accept, and I can hear, that sometimes even I feel like they are mocking when they say, we will recognize you as citizen.
I'm wondering, have you had any dealings with the National Unity Government, or do you know whether the National Unity Government has reached out to Rohingya community leaders to try to find, what changes need to be made?
No, they have some members of Rohingya community who were very much unknown until very recently to the Rohingya community, to show that, look, we have members of Rohingya community as well in our government.
Okay.
It's very, even the process is very, disingenuous.
Yeah.
And come on, like you can't just pick someone from the roadside and say this is our minister because he is Rohingya or he is another ethnic group that we are supposed to be friendly with now. And what they say is, they're still saying it. This is the same thing what Aung San has said to the ethnics, during the Pinlong agreement. Let's deal with bigger problem. Let's deal. Oh, this reminds me of another conversation. By the way, let me put this. Let's get rid of British. We will have Pinlong agreement, and we will sort out our internal problems later. Right. Yeah. In 1990, when they were campaigning for the election, the first time the NLD party was formed, and Aung San Suu Kyi became the leader of NLD. A group of the Rohingya delegation visited Aung San Suu Kyi. One of them was my grandfather, my cousins. When we say my grandfather, not my dad's father, his cousin, basically.
Okay.
Well, him. That's why I know this in detail. So they proposed. These are different Rohingya leaders from different towns, influential leaders, and also they had their own political party, formed political parties to participate in the election. So we will campaign all the votes for you, for NLD, against any military representation. What would you give us? Would you at least restore our equal citizenship? This is what Aung San Suu Kyi had to say at the time. Let's deal with bigger problem. We will deal with the smaller problem later. That's why, I perfectly remember in 2007, I always had this thing as well. Although I wanted to believe, that's what I believed, I think, democracy and Aung San Suu Kyi's coming to the power would change our situation. Because I was so desperate, perhaps we didn't see any other option, and we didn't want to pick up guns, or fight. For whatever reason, I wanted to believe, although I knew deep down that she's not going to do anything for us. Because in 2007, I was invited to speak in a school gathering in Sydney University. These are a group of law students and also international relations students and others who are also involved in the campaign for democracy in Myanmar. And one of the question was, do you believe? Because back then I wasn't talking about Rohingya, I was talking about democracy in general for Myanmar. And the question was, do you believe having democracy and Aung San Suu Kyi coming to the power will change Rohingya situations? And this is what I had to say at the time. It was spontaneous. I didn't even have to think. I said, Aung San Suu Kyi would be less a devil than the devil we have now.
Yeah.
That's what the idea. So why, again, NLT, let's say NLT and NUG now, it doesn't matter whoever next coming, they have the same hatred against Muslims in general, and particularly Rohingyas. So I don't believe anymore changing of the governments in Myanmar will change the fate of Rohingya.
As you were talking, it reminded me that 2 days ago, as I said, I interviewed Nin Tem Kin. It was a women's rights activist, predominantly a women's rights activist in Myanmar. And she was telling me the exact same thing that you're telling me, that when she tries to advocate for women's rights, she tries to advocate for LGBT rights, she tries to advocate for minority rights in general, the response is, we have to win the revolution first, and we can deal with rights later. We can deal with minority groups later. And it seems that the cycle is strong, because no one seems to understand that winning the revolution is securing these rights. Like without the securing of minority rights, women's rights, ethnic rights, religious rights, gay rights, what have you, without that, you haven't won the revolution. You've just put a different group of people in charge of the same system.
Yes. I it's exactly what you just said. When I talk to other people, to be honest, we have a group of Rohingya educated youth who still believe the change of political system in Myanmar would bring change to our situation as well. And that's the belief that I had in before 2012, even, somewhat until 2017. Now I try to explain to them is changing the driver doesn't change the vehicle. Unless you change the vehicle, changing the driver doesn't change the condition of your travel or your mode of travel.
Yes.
Is the what NUG's still the broader NUG's intention is still Burmese domination. They still want the country under their rule, the Burmese supremacy.
Yep.
And with all the conservative racial and religious ideas, but they want to call it democracy.
And this I assume also extends to the AA, because beyond the NUG, the Arakan Army joined the Three Brotherhood Alliance. They helped to initiate Operation 1027. So the Arakan Army currently is enjoying relatively high sort of popularity across the country for that very significant contribution. But I interviewed Nathan Rusler about 3 days ago, and we were discussing the satellite imagery in Rakhine State showing that as the Arakan army had reconquered territory from the Tatmadaw, the military, specifically the town of Butidang, but also the villages around it, there had been a campaign lasting for about a month of arson against Rohingya villages and Rohingya areas. So it seems that the Arakan army also on one day might be saying that they feel bad about what happened and that they're willing to make peace with the Rohingya, but we have, in May of this year, we saw these attacks, this continued campaign by the Arakan army against the Rohingya. So what do you think of the leadership of the Arakan army or of the Arakan people in general, or Rakhine if you prefer? Do you think that their attitudes are likely to change, or do you think that they will never voluntarily make a safe place for Rohingya in Rakhine?
Well, in the short answer is they will never make a safe place for Rohingyas in Arakan, and it is clear. I mean, it is like written on the wall, in a huge big letters in every statement they make and every time they speak. Anyone. By the way, for your audience, to explain, I myself is not formally an educated person, and I just passionately involved in these things, and I've learned a few things here and there, not trained in any way professionally. Even I can see their writings or when they speak, the ambiguity within whenever they talk about Rohingya, the reference to either Bengali, the reference to either Muslims, and all these things. This is one side, when they are communicating with international communities. On the ground, there are so many atrocities they are committing against Rohingya people. They are kidnapping, arbitrary arrests, like ransoms, in 2000, just last year, in some towns, I won't say the name because I don't want to jeopardize it, because as soon as I say it, their family members will be in danger. I know people personally who are taken because their family members were either in America or in Australia or in other places, resettled as refugees from Malaysia. They will kidnap them and say, you gotta pay, ridiculous amounts of money. Ransom, like Ngaya. But back then it's a bit of money. Now the Myanmar money is the inflated thing, means nothing anymore.
Yeah.
Hundred thousands mean nothing anymore. But let's put it in an American dollars term. It's like $25,000, $20,000. And some people that I know personally. Now, I also have engaged a few NGOs for negotiation. So let's start with some sort of talk, because I always believed, doesn't matter, even there is a armed conflict succeeded, end of the day, the solution is on the table. Always. Some sort of negotiation has to happen. So I always believe in having these compositions and these talks. I actually train people. I got myself training. How do we talk? Or how do we start? What are our rights and things are? And I also provide, within my limited knowledge that I have, these trainings to other Rohingya youth. And some of my students and some of, sorry, the word students is not even the right word. I think some of my trainees, let's say, and some of my colleagues and different people has engaged in different groups of Rakhine or AA's representative in different countries, or AA members in different countries. All of the compositions, end up in this way, saying there is no Rohingya, we will never recognize Rohingya, and we will accept you as citizens. In other words, the way they don't say it, you will not have political. You say basically what they say is, this is literal word they say, if you accept our rule. This
So
means,
you get citizenship, but subordinate to somebody else.
yes, if you accept our rule, that means you have no political right. But you can stay as a second-class citizens in the countries. Even that is only those who are in the country right now. Whenever we talk about, there's another group only in January this year. We had this talk in Kuala Lumpur with a group of people, and after they said this, I wasn't directly on the table though, but I'm involved with the team that was talking to them, and they were asking us in the second round of talk. I said, ask these questions too. What about repatriation of those who are in Bangladesh, because remember, those who are in Saudi Arabia, they are still stateless. They were in Pakistan, they are still stateless. They are there living for, and they can be arrested. They don't exist. They literally don't exist.
Yeah.
In Malaysia, 200,000, they don't exist in the world, in legality.
So what can be done about this?
So when we were asked, so what about repatriation of these people, going home of these people? They say, first of all, we don't know all of these people are actually Rohingya. It actually belong to Rakhine or not. So in other words, they was denying all of these people actually have the link with Rakhine. That's including myself, let's say. Okay. And secondly, what the other group has proposed, we can do verification. Because it is a new government, it will take time. It's been another 40 years, 100 years. So, your question, what is the solution? I think the only solution is Rohingyas has to have their own country.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't think, or, well, I can't even say or, because the other is also we can't live under the mercy of Rakhine or the Burmese. I would even challenge anyone who would say, no, you have to live under or with the Burmese, or in the greater Piedomsu, the Union of Burma, or the separate country. The Rakhine, with Rakhine. I would say, would you give your personal guarantee that with the atrocity that has been committed over the decades and centuries, for the matter, that will not happen again?
Do you think it would be sufficient to have not necessarily an independent country, but let's say an autonomous Rakhine or an autonomous Rohingya state, where the governance would be Rohingya and the majority of the population would be Rohingya, and it would be distinct from the remainder of Rakhine State? Do you think that could be a solution?
I've actually proposed this solution in 2022.
Wow.
I actually proposed this to the NUG meeting group. And then I realized, that can also be revoked easily if they have military power. Because remember, Kashmir had that power. Kashmir was the same, but the status of their thing was revoked. Unless, that state, even though we be part of, let's say, Greater Burma, but we have our own military, our own army.
Yeah, it would probably require, because even an independent country can still be invaded if they have the military power.
Yeah, but invading countries not same from revoking autonomous
Internal,
status.
status.
Yes, because internationally they're no longer, even though I know there are countries are happening, however, they still cannot do it by illegal means.
So you would say the only strong solution to the problem is an independent Rohingya country?
I would say this: they have to exercise the article of self-determination to. Yeah, I mean, otherwise, where is the protection? If the Burmese are not willing to, not only not willing to protect, but adamant to wipe out entire population, and Rakhines are the same, worse in many instances, then, I mean, would it be possible to say Jewish to live under Nazis?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think the only I think the only solution now is the separate
Independent
nation, or if the only safe solution, even for Rakhine, for example, because even if, let's say, if we have some political situation, political compromise that happen, but I don't think Rakhine will be peace, because there's this hatred and these sentiments still there, and many Rakhine leaders will come out as let's say, right-wing extremist leaders come up, and then the oppressed going to revolt anyway. So they will never have peace either. I think this is even good for Rakhine to let an area to have the Rohingyas govern by themselves and live themselves. I don't propose we have to have entire purely Rohingya. I'm not those. I don't know. There's a term. Pure race. You have to be only Rohingya people. I don't propose that. What I'm proposing is there should be an area where the Rohingyas are safe, and then there will be Rakhine living together as well. And probably there will be some part of area where Rakhine there will be Rohingyas too, and there will be some part of the Rohingya area there will be Rakhines as well living together, but having Rohingya have an estate where they can govern themselves and they can bring this displaced people back home and start rebuilding.
So I think that brings us quite sort of holistically or naturally to a concluding point, with the history of the Rohingya in Myanmar and the events that have led to the mass exodus and prolonged subjugation, and now a prognosis for the future. So before we conclude today, I first want to thank you very much for coming on and sharing your experiences and your insights with our audience. I think we all know who the Rohingya are, but there have been massive gaps in our knowledge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, thank you. And also, I wanted to say to the audio audience as well, because there's so much information we want to provide, and we have, and like it's been almost two hours we were talking, right? And sometimes we jumped in providing information. So I would suggest to your audience, well, please, do a little bit of like proper research to know more informations. And just because I'm saying it has to be correct, it's my truth what I'm saying, an absolute truth. There's no lies at all. But please do a bit more research and to get to know more about these things, and so that you can support the right cause.
And I think that ties in well, because you may or may not be aware of this. The end of our episodes, we always just invite our guests to share a direct message to the audience, something for the audience to think about or consider or discuss as they go about their day. So if you have any specific message or specific thoughts that you want our audience to have and to consider, I would invite you to share those ideas now.
Oh, I think I was doing best to say it. Anyway, again, thank you for listening this podcast. And Brad, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share. And the audience, I would say, this is the right moment to side with the Rohingya people, because these people has been left or neglected for centuries, if not decades. And I think this is time for them it's a well overdue time for them to have a place where they can call, or they can live safely and call home. And that is, of course, Rakhine, where they are originated from. So please support the Rohingya cause, and to get to know the Rohingya cause better, please, you can, reach out to many Rohingya people who would lead you to a lot of other useful informations, I guess.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. As regular listeners are aware, we often remind our audience about our nonprofit mission, Better Burma, at the end of a show. Truth be told, fundraising is hard work, and I can personally attest to the fact that it's really no fun to keep asking for contributions. Yet, the situation on the ground now in Myanmar is so distressing that we continue to do so on behalf of the Burmese people. What is most helpful at this time are recurring donations, which help alleviate both the stress and time involved in fundraising. If you are able to pledge a certain amount per month, our team can plan around having at least a consistent minimum amount to work within each month. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects, as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.
Oba yarananda dayananga yaranaya dayanam boda yaranam